Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. I trust we've all had a fabulous week and up as usual for some good discussion around manufacturing in the UK. We've got, I'm very happy to say, we've got a couple of new members joining us. I have to make an apology to Graham Cooper, pardon me, because I took it for granted that you were already a seasoned Kaizener, Graham. When I came to you last week, I said hello to Hamish Price and I didn't say hello to you because I've seen you so often on doing other things. And so perhaps you'd just like to give, if you care to, literally 10 seconds about who you are. And I'm particularly keen to hear about the Leeds Manufacturing Festival. Mute. You need to unmute.
How many times have I been told that this year? Yeah, I've had a 40-year career in manufacturing and it's just coming to an end. I'm just starting off my own business in manufacturing consultancy and just kicking off the website this week. But why I know you, and I see Angela on the screen as well, is because I'm the ringleader for the Leeds Manufacturing Festival, which is where the manufacturers of Leeds get together and present a united front to the young people in Leeds to try and overturn the views of manufacturing. So, I mean, hot off the press is we had a virtual event this morning where we had a manufacturing panel of business owners and apprentices talking to a load of school kids about apprenticeships. That has been recorded. It's going to be released around all the schools in Leeds during next week, which is Apprentice Week, and then we'll have it on our website after that. So, and next week, which is Apprentice Week, Leeds has got a huge virtual apprentice fair, and the Leeds Manufacturing Festival is a main sponsor of that.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Sorry, Graham, I cut across you. Beg your pardon.
I said that's probably more than you wanted. I think you only said 10 seconds.
Well, 12 and a half is fine. Bit of a stretch, but there we go. Also very pleased to welcome Darren Everard, who's joined us today. Darren, can you just give us a very quick intro to who you are and what you do? Can you hear me? Hello, Darren. Earth to Darren. There he is. Hello, Darren. Comms issues. Hang on a second. I'll can't hear you. Okay. So anybody got any news? Angela, you weren't with us last week because you were giving an address to the Lord Mayor of the West Midlands, Mr. Andy Street, I understand. What was that all about?
Yes, and sorry if I break up, my internet's not very stable at the moment. So I'm part of the group Forgotten Limited because I have a limited company. Like many other limited companies, we've received no support whatsoever from the government, whereas self-employed we haven't. So effectively, we've had 10 months now with absolutely no money at all. And obviously it's had a huge effect on a lot of businesses and a lot of people as well. There've been quite a few lives lost through suicide, which is quite sad, really. So I was asked by Forgotten Limited to my story to Andy Street. They've done a great job of getting Lord Mayors on board with what they're doing. They'd already done one with the Lord Mayor of Liverpool and Lord Mayor of Manchester. So this was the West Midlands one. So I had to tell him all about my story and what's happened to me in the last 10 months.
Well, I mean, I have to say, at a personal level, Angela, you're a source of constant joy and uplifting support. And I'm sorry to hear you've had such a a difficult time. I just sort of wouldn't have thought it. You're so positive. So very best of luck.
Thank
I have
you.
no idea if the government is going to do anything about it, but that would be good news. Sorry?
Forgotten Limited have actually put a presentation to the Treasury for what they class as the DIS. So that's the Director's Income Support Scheme. And I know that is being considered at the moment. Whether anything will come of it, we don't know. But momentum is definitely gathering, and there are other organisations within the UK who are really getting behind this. So we'll see what happens.
Well, all I can say is
FSB have been pushing. Sorry, Nick. FSB have been pushing because we've got the excluded group. I think it's 3.2 million companies that have been left out of the scheme. It keeps getting dropped into Parliament. They keep ignoring it. There's been an excluded group on Facebook that's got about 20,000 in. There's been 20 suicides in it already. It is, yes, definitely needs to be looked at.
Yeah, so if anybody's got any work, any contacts, I mean, it is terrible. It's just terrible. So I'm very sorry to hear, Angela, but totally admire your very positive spirit. Darren, can you hear us now, and can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you, and hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, indeed. Well done. Listen, congratulations, first timer on KC. Can you just give us a quick, 10, 15 seconds about who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Darren Everard, based in Southampton. Spent 16 years working for one of the main engineering recruitment agencies in the country. And a couple of years ago, set up my own, so Latitude Recruitment, based from Southampton, doing sort of engineering, manufacturing recruitment, mostly in Hampshire, but in sort of surrounding area as well. At the moment, it's just myself and a couple of part-timers, just getting going, but I've got someone else joining us in April. No plans to conquer the world, but half a dozen of us hopefully doing a good job on the South Coast. That's the plan.
Well, that's all best of luck to you, and well done. I mean, I started the business in the middle of lockdown, and it hasn't seemed to been that terribly difficult. In fact, I think I've probably prospered because of the lockdown, because this kind of virtual communication has been remarkably positive for what we do. Just wanted to let people know what I've been doing and possible conversations for the future. We did a news report today on latest funding for zero emissions aviation propulsion systems, H2 hybrid and electric. But what caught my eye was they also put some funding, not much, it was only 1.5, I think, into urban airports. And these are small modular buildings being designed by an architect who used to work for Norman Foster, who has got some really interesting ideas about the way all this revolutionary air travel we keep reading about, but he's interested in how it fits together with the environment of the future. And it's absolutely fascinating. I've invited him along for next week, and fingers crossed he'll come, because I think he's quite a visionary. And interesting point he made about being an architect is he said it's the architect's job, as of course we understand, to design, but to bring all the pieces together to make a building. He sees his job now as trying to bring all the pieces together on the future of aviation and the built environment. And what's interesting is he's got a lot of funding from Hyundai in that, and they've got their own vertical takeoff and landing planes. This is all about city taxis and cargo shipments landing right in the middle of towns. It's great stuff. So I'll bring him along. Anybody got any issues or stories they want to tell? Anything that they'd like to bring to the table?
Hi, Nick. Hi. Not really any issues, but more a question. We've had a couple of sessions now, and we heard. Forgive me, I can't remember the guy's name, but the elderly gentleman, not being ageist, but who was in his early 80s, who was talking about basically manipulating the currency in order to make us more. What was that chap called?
Oh, him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, John Mills.
Yeah, thank you. So John Mills. So and we've talked about how do we create an environment where we can become more competitive and more successful without sort of, let's say, a race to the bottom. And I just wondered, with the new, I think is quasi, I've got his name, the new sort of business secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, what would, if he turned around to us as a group and said, well, what's the one thing that you want in the short term or the medium term or the long term, and defining what that is in terms of, hearing what Angela just said, what would we turn around as a sort of collective and say to him with regards, the various different hats that we wear? Because again, I think part of what we need to do collectively is we need to be consistent in what we're asking when we're asked what do we want, so that we've almost got sort of the elevator pitch to say, well, if you're asking me what can you do in 2021, then this would be my response. If you're asking me what I'd like you to do before the next election, then this is my response. And if you're asking me what I want to do longer term, then this is my response. And I just wondered whether this sort of forum is a useful, place to almost start developing that, given the fact that you've sent us the link previously to the industrial policy, to what Vincent Cable's done, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not necessarily a one for tonight, but just, for me, that would be just hearing other people's thoughts on what that might look like and whether that would be useful. I'd just be interested.
Well, if I can kick off on something at a very macro level, I read a really interesting piece, oddly enough, in the Daily Telegraph about bemoaning the fact that over the last 40, 50 years, the state has, in a sense, been hollowed out and has lost the instinct and ability to know how to actually direct grand policy, so that it actually has been reduced to just tinkering around the edges, and any sense of vision long ago disappeared. Now, when it comes to our sector, somebody mentioned, I think it was Steve, a couple of 3 weeks ago, the Industrial Strategy Council, and he suggested that be given the same kind of statutory power as MITI or MITI, however it's pronounced in Japan. And that strikes me as being an extremely positive. I mean, I think, Steve, you were saying we need something like MITI. We actually do. It's the Industrial Strategy Council, but I think it needs to have statutory powers. I'm not the first person to have said that, but that strikes me as being one advance that puts the sector at a similar level strategically as the Bank of England and other statutory bodies.
I had another point to throw out there, just to maybe get a conversation. Is that I'd say what I'd like to see is a quality general practice. So it's the same as you have general practice for medical issues. You should have a general practice for quality issues. So if somebody's got a quality issue, you just pop in and have a look and say, what you need, mate, is a bit of training here and a Pareto. This is what you. Okay, that's been a bit facetious, but I just think there is nothing that really sort of really helps people or organisations with a lot of Kaizen type issues. And it's just one of those things. It's something I've tried to do as a person to support SMEs, but I've got nowhere. But like a lot of these things, I don't give up. So it's to create some sort of service that instead of like the full shebang, you apply for a grant and you get 10 grand for this or whatever, and a lot of that stuff works. It's something where you can almost get somebody to have a 2-hour conversation with somebody and saying, you need to do like this in Excel, trend it out like this. You can see it changes every time you put a new lot number on. Maybe you can have a look there. but that's just the sort of like I would put it under, you know, a quality general practitioner, and you just pop along like you get an appointment like you do with the NHS. But that was just one of those things that I had. I must have been having a not be able to sleep or something, you know.
Well, you know, I haven't knows who'd funded or how it would work, but that quality and adherence to higher standards. I mean, if there's one thing that completely freaks or should freak all of us out, is that in the future we have to be better just about than anybody else. We really do have to be world beating, to use a much hackneyed phrase, in order to keep going, because the competition is going to be hot out there, and we're only going to win on service and quality and and price. So quality is going to have to underpin that. Graham.
Yeah, I was just going to say in relation to what was just said by Steve, we used to have that. That was MAS, the Manufacturing Advisory Service.
Yeah.
And you could, you know, they would send a consultant into a small company, and it maybe only needed a day, like you say, just to point out a couple of obvious things. And
I've done it.
You were doing it, were you?
I have done some of that work. Yeah.
And it's sad, but sad because he can't be here tonight. Hasn't been able to be with us for the whole of since the start of the new year. Stephen Barr, who's a regular on Kaizen Central, he's got some treatments he has to have, and it coincides badly with this. But he was the former managing director of MAS, and that would be music to his ears to hear you say that, Graham, because we have said all along. In fact, Ewan, if you're reviving MAS would be, I think, generally one of the most welcomed things that a lot of people would subscribe to. It was very highly thought of, and it was cancelled as an act of political spite, as far as I can work out, simply because politicians like to come in and start kicking aside projects that were started by other people from different political parties. Thank you, Mr. Cameron.
There are other schemes out there, though. You've got the Manufacturing Growth Programme, which is a funded, which again manufacturers don't take up on, which is a very, very similar to MAS. Okay, it's covered only on select postal codes, but it's a similar service.
I notice it's got ERDF funding, Regional Development Fund, EU funding, and that's obviously going to be kicked into touch, isn't it? Is that going to be replaced?
I think, from what I understand, it is being replaced with something else from the government. From what I have been told, what that is, I don't know. But yeah, there are schemes out there.
Steve's just mentioned tool makers in the chat box. Ewan, I was talking to Sam Turner, who's CTO of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, and they are pressing the government on this. They are very, very concerned at the lack of manufacturing machinery makers in this country. We buy all our machines, or most of them, from overseas. And there is definite proof that productivity growth is seriously damaged by the lack of a domestic manufacturing machinery sector. And so they're going to be asking the government for, I believe, for some investment in developing our own machines. So if anybody's got any thoughts on that, people with longer memories when we used to have more, please chip in.
I'd be interested to understand what the issues are by not having a local machinery capability. I am old enough to know and to experience a local one, and it wasn't as good as the international ones. So the Japanese, even in the 70s, were better than the UK. In the 80s, they were way much better, which is probably why our industry died. But whether you buy it from Germany or Japan or Korea or the UK, it's what you do with it that matters, surely, not it itself.
Not strictly true. It's not just the point about buying some kit which you can then do. It's the software that runs it, and if you're not in control, you know, if your input is, and this is Sam's point, and I'm not sure I fully understand it, so shoot me down if I'm wrong, but if the way the machines are developed and run is coming from the way other people do it, we're less able to have control over our own manufacturing destiny. Our machines are going to be geared towards whatever is the international average. Steve,
right. Sorry, just with that.
Yeah, please go on.
You know, a controller is nothing more than a computer which can be programmed. So there's nothing wrong with buying the carcass and the controlling computer all as one, and then adding the software yourself. So I'm still struggling to see what that argument is, but I'll shut up and let someone else get on.
I mean, Bob, you make a very good point. You're exposing my ignorance, so I can't come back to you. I will check into that. I'll actually.
I think it's critical on the
bad idea to get
side.
Sam.
Sorry, it's critical on the tooling side, because there's a heck of a lot of businesses that go to China when in fact they would be better off if they could find a source in the UK. And you were talking to Rowan Crozier not so long back, and one of the advantages that that business has is it's got its own tool making capability, and therefore it is in control of the thing that makes the difference to its productivity.
Yeah, that's Brandau. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah. It's not my experience that it's just a question of when you buy a tool from somebody, you just buy a tool and it does something and you use it. The real benefit comes from any bespoke applications. In other words, we want a tool to do this, and look, this doesn't quite do it. Can you work with us to optimize this tool to do what we want? And if you can do that more easily if somebody's up 20 miles up the road, and it's not overnight stays to pop in and work on that. The other thing is with equipment is a lot of the time, like the semiconductor equipment you buy, you don't buy a piece of equipment, you also buy the complete process to work and optimize it, and that process is then developed in detail by the provider, and the processes that it runs are upgraded all the time. So with buying a tool, to my mind, what I've more experience of is that you buy a complete package. It's a complete service you're buying, and not just, you know, a pair of pliers that you do what you want with. When you're talking high volume production, it's even things like if you've got food making equipment, you want to be able to maintain it and clean it easily. You have to be able to squirt a hose at it and there's nothing there that will leak onto the electronics. It's all that level of detail that is almost impossible to work at over between here and China. So I think there are some real benefits from buying locally, but it's more the whole package, and not just, it's just a machine and then we use it. It's that total experience. I'll give you an example. In supporting the semiconductor industry in Scotland, there was a company called Plastic Design who were really good at making wet benches and things like that for processing chemicals. But the equivalent in America was Santa Clara Plastics. And they not only had the benches, but they had the whole wafer processing combined with the benches optimized for that wafer processing that made the difference between 10 die a wafer working or 50 die a wafer working. So it was that whole package that really brought value add. It's just my sixpence. I've always got plenty of shrapnel in my pocket, as it were.
Lee, you've been making some interesting points. Would you like to chip in on that? Hello, Lee? Yeah. No, you were unmuted. You're now
there
muted.
we go. There, I'm back. To be honest with you, each one of you have made some valid points, and I agree and disagree with certain aspects of them. I can comment on the machine tool aspect and the machine tool builders. I'm a tool maker by trade, backstreet, so I can turn, mill, grind, fit, make something from the back of it, a fag packet essentially. And back in the UK, you had Wickman's, Bridgeport, these kind of businesses that made your traditional machine tools ended up being bought out, and low cost CNC machines. It was when the revolution of CNC machinery came in. And I can remember being at college and operating a Moog machine, which was operated by punch tape, and now it's all software. But technology itself is moved on, and the cost of the machine tools from Taiwan, China, Japan were not the issue. They were a lot cheaper than we could make them back at the day. And when all this was kicking off, unfortunately in the 70s and 80s, we had union issues, people on strike, so we weren't very productive back then. But I'm pleased to say, as somebody that's been involved in manufacturing personally since the 80s, we are the best engineers in the bloody world, without a shadow of a doubt. And the biggest issue I found, both from being on all sides of the fence as an operator of machinery, as a tool maker, as a CNC operator, as a sales guy, and now a development business manager, and trying to get out there and find work for our organization. I do not go after the 30, 40 pound an hour stuff, because there's far too many people out there. We are experts at complex, accurate machining, but we use Japanese and German products to produce those parts. However, we do use UK tooling companies. We use local ones when we need a widget made or a tool ground up straight away. And the difference is back in my day, you would go and make that tool by hand and grind it yourself and all the necessary geometries. And now you can buy that literally and get it next day from multiple local companies. So the key to success that we found is trying to set ourselves apart from everybody else. Yes, we can make you a washer, but it's going to be a very expensive washer, because we do it to AS 9100 quality procedures. It will be inspected. But what gets my goat is there's not enough funding from government to train our organizations, train our young people. How many schools now have still got a woodwork or a metal workshop for those individuals like me that aren't academically gifted, but are intelligent enough and are very good with their hands, and they're more practical people, and they can use those skill sets elsewhere and develop themselves over a longer period of time. So I believe education is the way forward, and we really should do something from primary schools and get engineers back on board. Tool makers used to wear ties and be as respected as doctors. Now you can earn nearly as much money stacking shelves. It's crazy.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there, Lee. But I mean, Ewan, I went across to your if you're making a list, education, pardon me, education is obviously key. We discussed the FE white paper last week, so there is a glimmer of hope in there. Ewan, when you were at, Ewan, when you were at Hayward Tyler and Peter Brotherhood, were most of the machines in those companies foreign bought?
Yes, they were. Yeah. I mean, and that was mainly down to, the fact that, well, I think there was an element of two things. One is that, and I'm going to say, we were told that, you know, they were the best machines for the job, and they weren't UK machines because there weren't any. But also, people get used to what they've been trained on and what they've used. So then you get the sort of the operator actually having clearly an important say in understanding what the machine's going to be used for and what the requirements are, and then upskilling those operators, because they're the people who are ultimately going to drive it.
Yeah,
you also had a huge amount of software control of that system as well, in terms of your real-time monitoring of it, your ability to predict the capacity needs, to shift people ahead of, you know, the day that they were needed. So you had a heck of a lot of intelligence built into the system.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I'm going to say, was all homegrown from the people, you know, from our people, as opposed to buying that in, because it was then the blending of the, let's say, the operators who know what's actually going on, and then a combination of then being able to anticipate what is likely to happen, and then putting that knowledge into a software package so that you can start doing predictive simulation, so that rather than having individuals, you know, second guessing one another, you can try and base it on a single data set, and then you have discussions around that single data set, which makes those discussions much more, let's say, engaging and interesting and valuable, because you're no longer basing it on opinion, you're basing it on, let's say, fact.
Yeah, and the key thing about something like that is it makes greater use of the machinery, because it manages your uptime more productively, rather than worrying about, is it, you know, is this machine British or not? Because actually getting more out of it, because you're managing the data and the people and the connectivity between people and machines and materials better. Integrating, and all I'm saying is optimizing the whole is far better than worrying about whether a mechanical piece of equipment is British, American or German.
I will find this data for you, Bob, because it you know, Sam Turner, I don't think HVMC would stick their necks out on this unless they had some strong data and reasoning behind it. So I'm actually looking for it now. So Roy, you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, so I had an interesting experience because of COVID. Back in March, April last year, we decided that we wanted to help out somehow with the COVID. And one of our engineers decided to design a face shield. And he looked at what everyone was doing, and the point I'm going to make is all about added value. And he saw what everyone was doing. Lots of people were 3D printing face visors, at least the kind of the headband bit of it. And he said that's completely pointless because it takes you forever. So he had a look round at techniques, and he decided to go for a technique that we generally don't use in the space business, which is injection molding. And the experience we had was that we had a local company who did injection molding. We had a local company that designed the tooling that they use. So we went to them and they designed as a tool. We had to procure the blank for the tool from Germany, because they're the best ones at producing the quality tools. And we got a kind of mid-range quality tool. And then we actually decided to machine it ourselves. And we've got a 5-axis machine in our workshops. And we machined it. And the guy in the injection molding company said, well, yeah, we'll need 3 or 4 days to get it to work. We'll need to, you know, fettle the bits here and there and sort it out. It's quite a complex tool because it had a very deep cavity in it. And we made this tool in our workshop. So in a few days, put it on the tool, on the injection molding tool, and plus or minus 1%, it worked first time. And for me, the added value was the design of the tool was done in the UK, which is difficult and expensive. The machining of the tool we did ourselves and was difficult and expensive. And if we got someone else to do it, we would have spent the 3 or 4 days making the tool work. Instead, we spent 4 days making, I think it was something like we were churning out 2,000 to 5,000 headbands per day. So we actually ended up delivering the visors to the NHS 2 weeks earlier than we anticipated. So I think when you're talking about stuff like this, think about where the added value is. The machine itself, is it added value? If it does something specific, maybe, but if not, then you get it from wherever you get it from. But certainly the design and the key features of things like machine tools, I think that's where the added value is. So if we're going to talk about things like this, I think you first of all got to figure out where the critical quality points and the added value come in, because that's what makes a difference in the end to the output.
Yeah, just again on, sorry to be a pain about this, but has anybody ever been around the Renishaw factories? If you go around a Renishaw factory, you'll see a lot of British-made Japanese machine tools, but the productivity of those at 24/7 running is managed through the intelligence of Renishaw developed manufacturing technology, in the sense that they have like robot vehicles that feed the machines with parts and tools and keep it running 24/7. So they take a standard, well, it's not really a standard, it's quite a sophisticated machine, but they actually control the intelligent bit that makes it a super duper machine. And that's, I think, the most critical thing is take control of the critical elements, not the basic elements.
Exactly my point, Bob. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, welcome, Julian. Nice to see you. So we've been talking about conversations sparked by Ewan, really, asking about if the new Secretary of State at Bayes was to come to us, or to us actually, what's the shopping list we'd given, the wish list, and I mentioned something around machine tooling and the machines that manufacturing machinery, I should say, most of which is brought in from overseas. And I said that there's a very strong argument made by the high value manufacturing catapult that if you're not more self-sufficient in your own manufacturing machinery, you lag behind others when it comes to productivity and output. And I haven't made the argument at all well, because it's rather like the Schleswig-Holstein question. 3 people knew it, one of them's died, one of them's dead, and I've forgotten. So we shall have to see if we can get Sam Turner along to talk about that, but because everybody's kind of knocked it out of the park at the moment. But anyway, that was really it. If there was a kind of wish list, I suspect, Ewan, I'm going to put you on the spot here, because I know that you and I have talked in the past about patient capital, long-term investment. The British bank, British Business Bank, does have a patient capital arm to it. Have you looked at that, and do you think it's moving in the right direction, or do you think that they haven't got it right? And what else, if you had the Secretary of State here who had links into the Treasury, what would you say they need to do to it?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure we've got enough time to answer that question tonight, but I think one of my sort of main criticisms of the British Business Bank, I think, it's great, but in order to actually access any of the capital, what they do is they deploy it into fund managers and venture capitalists. So, the money goes via an intermediary in order to be deployed. And I think, the problem is, in a number of businesses that I speak to, if you look at, I've got a number of businesses that, let's say, have got loans with Funding Circle as an example. And, the Funding Circle are going to government in effect and taking advantage of CBILS loans and just refinancing existing loans. So it's, the same businesses are getting, let's say, money which is not being deployed into other businesses or new opportunities, but is just refinancing. And the benefit for the financiers, of course, is it's reduced risk because the government's taking 80% or whatever it is in terms of the actual risk capital which is at risk. So I think often it's a lot of the, let's say, the financing programs end up being clever financial engineering as opposed to actually getting spent on businesses that, you know, are going to make a difference and need that long-term patient capital. And when I talk about long-term patient capital, I mean, you know, 5-year plus. The only way you can borrow money of that sort of tenure is against a property. And that's just absolutely crazy because, you know, economic cycles don't last, you know, they last a lot longer than 12 months. Economic cycles take 3, 4, 5 years. And you know, my investment decisions on NPI or my investment decisions on a tool, you know, will probably take a payback of at least 3 years. Clearly, I hope it's less time than that, but at least 3 years. And if I can't get financing to sort of tie to that, and financing which is not just focused on asset-backed lending, then I'm going to really struggle to make that investment decision. So I'm you know, there are lots of parts of that we can talk about, but there's a few thoughts to throw out.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. They were talking about the, sorry? And when the vaccine, Kate Bingham, many months ago, she was talking to some investors, and I think that there was something to do the patient capital fund, and it was because she is a venture capitalist or fund manager. I forget what she is, but that's where the money was going. Was into, as you say, these fund managers, and wasn't going. It sounds like it should be doing something positive, but isn't. Anybody here running a business who, if they had the opportunity to get some patient capital at reasonable rates without having to mortgage their houses, would go for it? Yeah, Lee.
Right, I'm there. Sorry. What we also what made our investment decisions more clinically clear to us was the deal on the tables that the machine tool providers themselves provided. So we have a lot of very modern. They're called DMG Morries, and on a car analogy, we're BMW and Mercedes rather than your Fords and your Skodas. Not that there's anything wrong with those, of course. So which is why we put ourselves to go after high end. The banks wanted 4, 5, 7%. DMG's Morrie's own finance is less than 1% with no personal guarantees on the directors or the business. Therefore, we went over there to purchase one machine and looking to invest around 300,000. We ended up spending 3.5 million, and it just took the company forward immensely. But it was only because of the opportunity of the finance that was there, and the company themselves giving my MD the confidence to literally go for it.
Well, that's a great story. Julian, you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of, you know, put a bit more color on what Ewan said about how Funding Circle and the crowd lending market, as opposed to crowdfunding, which is equity based. I think the original idea of Funding Circle, before they were able to draw down, and Ewan, correct me, they got a massive tranche of government money. I think well, I mean, simply because they were able to deploy funds more effectively than the extremely conservative clearing banks. And this was a new concept, you know, created by tradable platforms with the internet, and the software allowed it to happen. But the relevant thing, I mean, Funding Circle, I used to be on the board of Funding Night, and there's a whole lot of people out in the market. What differs from conventional lending is that the interest rate floats to the level of risk. And Funding Circle, like all of them, have said, we don't want that to be a continuum. We want it to be categorized into low, medium, and high risk. And the consumer, just the individuals who are putting the funding up, or as Ewan said, big tranches of money coming in from government, can deploy this funding quite quickly. So I quite like that model. But the British Development Business Bank, I was on the receiving end of trying to raise some money for the East and West Midlands, and they put out a tender for venture capital companies to win tranches of 50 million of equity and 50 million of debt. So two tranches of 50 in both formats. And I mean, I suppose I would say this anyway, because I'm sort of quite a supporter of entrepreneurialism in that area. The danger is if they hadn't used expert evaluators of business prospects, it just would have become a government turgid thing. It's quite, what I'm saying is, I think it's quite a constructive thing to place those funds for deployment with experts that are already running successful venture capital enterprises.
That point.
Yeah, and can I just add? I think yes. I don't want the sort of, let's say, the headline of this to be that I don't think that the focus by going through the British Business Bank and the various, let's say, tentacles that it has now expanded into through British Patient Capital, and I think some of the ECF funds and the angel funds, is fantastic because it is getting capital to places where otherwise capital wouldn't be deployed. I think one of the challenges is, though, that there still is a lack of, when we talk about British patient capital, it's not very patient. And it certainly is not as patient as it needs to be to support long-term investment decisions that, in my experience, the vast majority of manufacturers need to make. And that is the challenge.
What would you say, Ewan, to Lee's company? I mean, that sounds like a fantastic deal. And obviously what it means is that, they've got fantastic support from their providers. Excellent. What I think it was 1%. He said that surely is the way to go, or is it the way to go? Does it not tie people into deals that perhaps they could have got elsewhere?
Well, I think it's fantastic, and I think, but if you look at it from a wider perspective of, okay, I'm running a business, right? I've got the capital equipment sorted, I've got the bricks and mortar sorted, but now I want to invest in the next generation of product, or I want to take on X number of people to be able to train and develop them. I can't go down to my bank, or I can't go and say, can I borrow against my future IP, or can I borrow against my IP? Because it's not recognized. It's back to a conversation that we sort of touched on, I think, last week, which is, unless you've got a tangible asset, you have to probably fund it through equity, and therefore equity means putting your hand in your own pocket or giving some of your business away to somebody else. And that's the sort of, it's the age-old challenge. You've got to generate enough profit to then invest in the future of the business. But that long-term sort of patient capital in other, let's say, non-tangible assets, I still think a lot of businesses struggle to fund and, find that challenging in how they can actually support that sort of investment. I mean, well, that's my view. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Barry, can I ask you, as somebody who came into Playdale, I think I'm correct in saying it was around about 15 years ago, 17 years ago, and you've really done wonderful things with the company since you became CEO MD. Did you have to borrow money to help with that? Did you have to raise capital, and if so, how difficult was it?
We were a classic, lifestyle business.
And, you know, listening to you guys, you know, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. I think we were a lifestyle business. We were, you know, the family had a fantastic property portfolio, but didn't have a fantastic balance sheet. And, you know, people talk about patient capital and this, that, and the other. You know, it's expensive debt at the end of the day. You know, we looked at different things, and the hoops you have to jump through is crazy. And the first thing we've ever taken advantage of, we paid everything with cash. You know, we've had to generate profits because people wouldn't touch us. You know, they didn't have the assets to loan against. There was PGs in that business that took years to remove and reduce. And people are interested. And the Sybil's loan is our first patient capital, because that really is patient capital. You know, we've got 1.3 million at, you know, 3%. And that was our worst case scenario, and we're going to be able to invest some of that and pay it back over 6 years. That's pretty patient, you know. And the return on the investment we'll be making in some of the big machinery. We've got a £300,000 spend just about to happen. You know, the repayments on the Sybil's loan when it kicks in is less than the savings that we're going to be making. So if you can get it into manufacturing, if you can get patient capital into manufacturing, it will, you know, it should pay for itself in a well-run business. But you know, look at it from the bank's perspective, we're just not sexy enough, are we? We're just not creating the margins that they want to get involved with, and we're just, you know, it's risk at the end of the day. And do they put it in a tech firm that's giving 10 times multiples, or do they, you know, stick it in a manufacturing company that may do okay? You know, you've got to understand from their side. I think it's, you know, we've learned the hard way at Playdale. We've had to make it, you know, do it. I got off a call yesterday with a US VC, you know, super excited about Playdale, you know, oh, we want to do this and the other. You know, it takes time, I think, to build up that. You know, you've got to have a successful business to be successful, haven't you? When it comes to taking someone else's money, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to make the profits to prove that you're worth investing in. Well, that makes sense, of course. Anybody else got any war stories about raising cash?
I've got a question though, Nick, and to a lot of the eminent people here. First of all, can anybody hear me? That's not the question, by the way. Can anybody hear me first? Okay, good. Now comes the question. So I'm basically, with my company and with a couple of other companies, we're working on a bit of research / product development in terms of sustainability and sustainability-led product development, mainly in the healthcare sector. And as you would have probably seen through the chat window between predominantly Roy and myself, that we've got a KTN application that's gone in. But I'm also looking at private investors, people who have a certain, let's say, portfolio of ethical investment budgets or pots of money that I would really like to talk to and present what we are trying to do. So if anybody has got any links or any connections in terms of essentially people with an ethical portfolio of investment opportunities, I would really appreciate a chat with them. So
what's the company that you want to raise funding for, or the project?
It's my company, Julian. It's called Equity. Yeah. It's a project is about how do we eliminate single-use plastic packaging completely from the healthcare sector, starting one pill at a time. So the UK alone, a paracetamol accounts to about 500 million blister packs, which is about 1,000 tons of plastic that's completely gone forever every year. So we're trying to put together a team, or we've developed a concept that if it gets acceptance with the people, it will become a solution to remove this single-use plastic packaging in the medical sector with something that's more about reusable and recyclable. And it ties in very well with the UK Plastics Pact, amongst other things as well. And it basically meets a number of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as well. So that's the whole crux of the project. I can share things to you separately if you want and show you what we've done so far.
Yeah, if you could send it to us, that'll be useful to see a little bit more detail, happy to share it through social media and things that might help.
Super,
don't forget,
thank you, gents.
everybody. Don't forget that everybody's, because you've all gone through the Kaizen Central members page, you've registered for that. Everybody's details are on that page. So if you want to have a quiet chat with anybody, everybody's number and or email is on the page. That's when you submitted, when you registered for it. Any questions, do let me know. 5 minutes.
Can I just have a quick
before,
question?
Yeah, Barry, sure.
Are you looking to give up equity for this? Or are you just looking for a loan?
Are you talking to me, Barry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about equity as well.
Okay, well, Manchester, you want to be talking to a lady called Beth Horton, and she runs the Palatine Impact Fund, and that is bang up their street, what you've just talked about.
Okay.
I'll email you.
Are you okay? Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, that's great, Barry. Thank you for that. Yeah. So just popping my LinkedIn for everybody to get connected if they want to. So thanks, Barry. Thank you for that.
Super. And it's interesting about, you talk about ethical investment. BlackRock, who are, I don't know, it was 1.3 trillion under management, something like that. They are mandating that any company they invest in and their supply chains have a carbon net zero policy or process underway. And it's the ethics underpinning investing are becoming, I mean, happily I should say, because I think it's good news. But that is becoming part and parcel of future investment. And I'd be interested to hear, I don't know if anybody else has heard stories like that about investments having sustainable ethical strings attached.
It's not just investments now either, Nick. I attended a webinar with Kinetic UK, a defence organisation, and it was all about social values and ethics and integrity and transparency and things like that. And they are now looking for businesses that want to engage with Kinetic that must have a social value policy. And it's all about so they're effectively going to be awarding tenders for 2 businesses that do put something back in one way, shape or form, is the bottom line.
And it's got to be demonstrable. It's not just got to be a mission statement stuck on the office wall, I take it.
No, in fact, it even went as far as they were discussing contractual obligations of social values. So if you win I don't know, £1 million contract and you agree to spend 50 building a playground or whatever, then, and you don't, I think there will be contractual obligations within that. It was quite deep. It was deep.
Yeah. So we just recently signed the Skynet 6A contract for, I don't know what it is, £250 million worth of satellite. And the government want to know, what are we doing about early careers? What are we doing about engaging with UK SMEs that can supply us with things that we've traditionally maybe got from elsewhere? And the social value side of it as well. They're all at the moment probably questions on the contractual documents, but I agree with Lee. They're going to move in the direction of you have to do this or that. In France, I think if you get a government contract, you have to put 20% back to French SMEs or French-owned SMEs, and I think we might end up heading in that direction.
Well, hallelujah, if it works. Yeah, absolutely. Hallelujah. Okay, guys. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to say anything, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and felt that simply you didn't want to add anything to what was already being said. But lovely to see you all, and I hope you'll join us all again next week. As I said, I'm going to try and get this fella from the urban airport to come along. Fascinating interview with him today. He'd bring a lot to the party, so I'll let you know on that. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful week, everybody. It's been a pleasure listening to all this, and we'll find out data on that manufacturing machinery thing I mentioned, because I know that you're skeptical, Bob and Roy and everybody else. Whoa. But I shall see if I can back up this contention with some solid data. Have a great week. See you next time. Thank you for being with us.
Cheers, everyone. See you all. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.